I've been looking at some of the others, people that have do lives, and well, there's a lot of people that don't do much better than me. So thank you to all 6 of you. Live long and prosper. Well, I pulled this thing out today because we have, I think this is 2 or 5, and this is 10, I think. And I took a couple of pictures that I put on Facebook of my needle valve. Oh, I guess it has to come all the way back here to get it in focus. See how that tip is shiny up there? It's not supposed to be. You might have a little circle in it, but it's shiny all the way down, isn't it? And I doubt very much that I can make it any better this way. No, oh. Anyway, it's all shiny that far down. Now, if you can see it much, the tip is black. So open your screen up and you might see the tip is black, and then from there back to the shoulder, it's shiny. That means this was driven into the carburetor. You turn it in with very lightly with 2 fingers. The problem they have here with this carburetor is this is a friction. Like the threads are off just a little bit, or they're slight interference fit. A lot of the old stuff had springs on it. Well, they used to have a larger head on them. Now it's a spline for me to adjust with my nice cheapo special tool that I got toolkit off Amazon. The splines seem to be pretty common, and well, they need adjustment. A lot of these have adjustment stops, but this was the early version, just keep you from adjusting it with a regular old screwdriver. It didn't take long. So I don't know if I can even make this carburetor go. When I first got a hold of it and fired this saw up, it's a no. See if I can do this carefully. 435 extra torque, or X torque, Husqvarna. I got it to fire right up. I was running richer than a dog. Well, the needles were out 3 turns each. That ain't right. So as I started to turn them in, all of a sudden the thing ran away. Well, then I turned the idle down. The idle was way out of whack. They had the idle speed set up there all around 7 or 8,000. When your cutting speed's 9 or 10. Yeah. So here we are, just gently. You notice the fingers aren't looking like, they look like they're working. They are. Going in there. It's a firm, so any serious increase back it up. Okay. We're getting a consistent stop right there. All right. Now I usually, for me, I like to start about, there's 1 turn, 1.5, somewhere between 1 and 2. And like I say, I couldn't, there's no way I could get it originally, and they were at 3 turns like that. That ain't right. Now there are some, usually the high speed can be 2, 2.5, maybe 3. It's rare, but it happens because what they did was made the thread so fine so that any adjustment you might make with a little plastic stop won't be far enough to make any critical difference. They want it factory set for emissions. Now the other thing I learned here too, I don't think you can see it, but maybe you can because of the light. Up in here is Zama, but next to it, that's important just under the last A of Zama, is a C1L, I believe it is. Nope, C1T. And that's your actual carburetor model number. C1T Zama. And then your other numbers are up there on top, are etched in. Appears to be laser etched instead of stamped. So that's how you can tell which carburetor it is. The guts are very similar to your Walbros and such. Carburetor I miss the most, Tillotson. That was an excellent carburetor. I mean, excellent. We used to do it with the steel chainsaws. Guys would bring in a 020, and the 020 wasn't running quite right. And we'd check it and pull it out, and there'd be a Walbro carburetor in there. Well, if you could get the Walbro cleaned out and running well, the Walbro was a larger carburetor, put out more power. If you wanted it to operate through the RPM range as well as live a lot longer and more consistent, in the old 020 steels, we'd pull out the Walbro and put in a Tillotson. I think it was an HU1. Almost all your problems are solved. All of them. I mean, just gone. You'd lose that real heavy top-end power that they had with a bigger carburetor, but it just plain functioned so much better. Customers would pull the trigger and come back, "What'd you do to my saw?" No, we put it together right. Ancient Chinese secret, right? Okay, teeny little needle valve goes in. This is the part where I really can't show you, because if I turn the phone down here far enough that you can see what I'm doing, it'll fall over. That's just barely hooked in here. Hey Vaughn, how are you? I usually don't pay attention, so don't feel offended when I don't answer. I'm usually working or talking, one or the other. All right, I'm going to lay that down on the spring. Slide that under the head of the bolt or screw. Do a double check before I tighten it. Tap the little arm. And down we go. By the way, that little screw in there is a T8. This is a T8 Napa that I was going to replace. I twisted it off in trying to tighten up one of my flexing box wrenches. Well, look at that. There you are. Your lever is in place. Now, the other check is to get something and run it over the top. I think I'm hitting it ever so slightly. So in a kit that I bought here a while ago, I think I bought this rebuild kit because it's cheap more than anything else. You got to go in there and take a look at that puppy. Walbro and Zama. Now I have a C1, what was it? C1T. And that's on here. There is C1T right there. All they're looking for is the flat edge. You want to be sure that it's just either just touching without moving. Now, how's one way to know? Okay, if I look at that properly, it's just touching the, I know you can't see it, but it's just touching the lever. One of the ways, well, there again. One of the ways you know you have it right, hold it directly, and there it's bumping. You see how it's bumping? Let me turn it around your side. This once it's a stamped piece, so that if I go by this side, there's an edge that just catches the lever, which means the lever's right on the borderline of being perfect to slightly high. When it's that close, leave it alone. Another way is look across the eyeball. You can see it's just barely high. Now why I say generally leave it alone is because it's just when it's that close, it's just too hard to bend that little sucker. So I think I'm going to leave well enough alone. Looks good. Here's another part of your education for the day if I can find my pointer. Well, I guess I'll just have to use something else. Where's my pointer? Oh, it was here. We'll go with the T8 now. Okay, this is your main jet feed. There's your main jet. There's your main jet feed. Little bitty hole. And there's your main jet right there pressed in. And that feeds into it, as you can see, it feeds in at a slight angle forward so that you won't be able to see it down in the hole, but there it is past the choke plate. Now if I get it right, you see that bump in there. It's on the same side as my... There we go. You see the bump right there underneath the screw? Tip of the screw? That's where the main jet goes in, right in front of the choke plate. And it's aimed forward, so the stream can draw fuel out. The other side here is a brass jet, and that's for your idle, the messed up idle screw. Both of them are in and they're backed out about a turn and a half. I take a look at the screws and they're sitting just about the same height at a turn and a half, so that's a good sign there. Anything else to point out here? Yes. Now in this carburetor, because it has everything's on one side, this is your fuel pump plate that's going to go on top of the diaphragm. This is your transfer. When the diaphragm fuel pump plate is on top here, it pushes fuel through here, goes all the way down through the body. In fact, there's plugs here for it. There's a brass plug here and a brass plug there where they drill this thing to be able to make that feed hole to push fuel to the needle, and then have the diaphragm as the suction pulses come and pressure pulses, pop this thing open. It's kind of a messed up deal, but it works. So I'm going to continue assembling the bugger. No, I didn't need this kit, but it's nice to know that when I am looking at just plain flat across for that inlet arm, that C1T is what it should be. Zaman Walbro. That kit, that's the first time I've had it out. There's a bunch of other tools in here in this kit that I got off of Amazon. Carburetor kit. I ended up with 2 sets of these, so I didn't know they'd come in this kit. There's things in here to, like a punch, sharp-edged punch to take out your Welch plugs. And what do I mean by Welch plugs? I mean these little guys. They're always interesting to drive them out and then put them back in. And they supply one to put it back in with. And they have some other punches and such there for seats and instructions with it. This is actually designed to take a particular seat out. I'd have to read it to see what it's for. It's an actual mini slide hammer. Why did I do that? I did it because I'm a retired guy that wants to fart with this stuff until the end of time. So I might come across sometime when this is what I need to do, and I'll have the crap to do it. It's just one of those things where I'm old enough, I like toys. You know what I mean? Okay, this goes on to here. This is my inlet needle tester. That being that you can use it for so many different carburetors, they gave you an adapter to adapt it down to a smaller hose from 1/4 inch. And this will actually build up pressure on the inlet, and it has a release. There, has a release knob down here. Just turn that to open. Whoop. And you can test your inlet. This goes to 2 bar, roughly 30 psi. I say roughly. 1 bar is 14.5 psi. That's how the Europeans did it. Ours is, we use one bar is 1 atmosphere. They decide 14.5 because they said nothing is actually at sea level, or very rarely. So they kind of picked a semi-average. For us, we picked 14.7. Why? Because that's what absolute pressure is at sea level. So we stayed with it. But 14.5 is easier to work with. For a lot of your pressure, though, just count at 15 because it's not that far off. You say that's 0.5. It is. If you started getting into a lot of pressure, few hundred pounds to 1,000 pounds plus, yeah, now you're starting to have a problem with differences. But even then, it's not as much as you would think, because you're up in thousands of pounds, and here they'd be calibrating in numbers in the hundreds for your kph. They're not kph, for your kPa, kilopascals, and your MPa, megapascals, and your kilogram per centimeter squared. Yeah, we just have PSI, thank you. The Europeans seem stupid, but they have bar. Okay, bar works. At least you know what you're dealing with bar. The rest of it's a disaster. So, there we are. I'm going to take my little pressure gauge and put it over here and start assembling the rest of the carburetor. On this one, the gasket goes down first. This one has actually doesn't have much of any way to properly install this thing. There are some interesting differences, though. No, the way I'm going to have to use this to align it is your fuel pump bump. Right. There's your fuel inlet for your top cover. See, the use of plastic is supposed to help be a thermal insulator. Now this part I've already cleaned up, because there's almost nothing here except inlets. Inlet and outlets. Several of them, actually. There's a little diaphragm chamber, or check valve chamber is usually what that is. And this is your pumping side chamber. No, that's another slot for a check valve. And your inlets. They did a lot of interesting things when they built these. Now these two sections go together. They're held together with a screw. And the funny part is, there is nothing. Oh, there is one. There's a screw and one pilot dowel built in. It's in the aluminum. Got my Lennox screwdriver set that I've almost never used. At one point in time, and it's probably going to work to that again, I had like 4 sets of tools. One set on the road here at home. Of course, my major tools at the shop where I was working. And then tools in the shop itself. Oh my goodness, I got ahead of myself. I haven't worked on a Zama carburetor before. So I put this all together with the gasket, but forgot the dang diaphragm. Another thing that I did was I pulled out a kit that has the same needle in it, but the problem we have here is the springs in the kit are much larger than those that are designed for that particular kit. Right. So then you can get into all kinds of other trouble. All right, line up your diaphragms in your holes and essentially your check valves. Remember those slots I was telling you about? And that dowel, the slots for the check valves, that is. Oh, it's terrible having big happy fingers. I get in the way a lot. Oh. There we go. The actual pumping diaphragm is like a pretty firm plastic film. Briggs & Stratton used to have a diaphragm to run a semi-automatic choke. Actually, it was an automatic choke, operated off engine vacuum. And you're supposed to, and the guy had to teach me, I'd put in probably a dozen of those diaphragms. And the chokes worked okay for me, but not great. But we're actually supposed to take the choke link and push it under and over center. And it would push the diaphragm down while you were tightening it up and slightly overextend it. That way when the spring pushed up to run it back around to open, actually to close it, then it would have a full stroke because the diaphragm would be stretched slightly. And I didn't know that, and they always worked well for me. In fact, I think I hand stretched a few of them when I was learning, just as a kid. A much younger kid, I should say, because I was about 20 something. Okay, now I have to line up. Okay, let's do a double. Ah, diaphragm's on backwards. You have to follow your pilot hole there. Pilot hole there for dowel that's in the plastic cover. So I had this thing upside down. Plastic cover dowel, hole dowel. Now these aren't as critical as some of the others when you're putting it together. There were some of the diaphragms had a pin on them with a groove, and the pin and the needle had a fork. All right, we're going to have to do this the other way. Right there, they would have a little pin with a groove in it. This one's just flat. And the groove would slide into the fork on the metering lever here. You had to be careful taking them apart if you're trying to reuse the diaphragm, because it would make a big dang mess. All right, now we're making sense. And last but not least, where's my dowel pin? There it is. And there we are. Get our screws. I don't always, but this one's easy enough. Start the screws by hand and run them through the diaphragm carefully. And sometimes diaphragm gets out of place and you have to feel the screw going through it easily. If you feel much resistance and you can't start the threads, pull it up, because the diaphragm may have rolled in there. And if it rolled in there, that means you pulled it and stretched it, and it's not going to work properly. I'll tell you about this rubber hose here shortly. Tighten this one up. Oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Oh yeah. I modified one of my tools. I don't know if I can show you or not. Oh, there's my pointer. Oh, I guess I can't. There it is. Well, it's a 4mm hex wrench. It's a steel. This sucker's old. I picked these up when I worked at H. Rubin and Son when he was in business in Cobleskill back in the mid 80s. Actually, mid to late 80s. Just put a piece of fuel line on there. Since it takes the hexes out and it gives you a nice gripping surface to spin your screws with. I know it sounds stupid, but it's a very good adaptation. And I'm going to have to do that on my screwdriver here, because it works so much nicer. Makes it larger. And you wouldn't think it'd do that much. You know, you're only talking 1/8 of an inch on each side, which means it's a 1/4 inch larger. Much easier to spin. And it's Tygon, so it's very easy to spin because you can grip it. Okay, bring your screws down to touch. This part's pretty important because a lot of people like to, especially with a plastic, they like to bear down on it. You're right there. Just crisscross tighten it until everything is firm. And you got a consistent, every time you go to tighten it, each of the screws is roughly the same. Okay. Now you can give it a good snug. You don't want to go bearing down on them. They're little bitty 5mm screws. There you are. Well, no, they might just be 4mm actually, if that. So be very careful with them. And you're talking plastic, so there it all is. Now, this is your fuel inlet here. Great big long fuel hose comes up there. What's the other rubber hose for? That connects to your primer. And the primer has one purpose. The primer, when you push it in, it pushes fuel into the tank, if there's any fuel in it. Otherwise, it pushes air into the fuel tank, which if you have a vent that's working properly, it'll build slight pressure in the tank. And then it pushes it up through, or pushes a little bit up into the fuel. But more than that, when you release the bulb, it makes a vacuum. And this is supposed to make a slight vacuum in here and draw fuel, excuse me, through the check valves in here. Draw it right on up through. Now, mind you, you just build a very slight pressure in the tank, correct? And then you released it, and a vacuum on the opposite side. So fuel goes in here, across and on out. And what's it do on the other side of the bulb? Sprays it back into the tank. So you're circulating and pre-charging the fuel pump side of these things. Meaning that they built things cheap enough that this thing can't draw its own fuel. One, but the second one, most important purpose is to make it 1 or 2 pull start. Your carburetor isn't trying to draw gas out. Your carburetor has gas there. Because these are always above fuel tanks down here, carburetors up here, so they pre-charge it. All right, well, there's Pops doing this stratified C1T Zama carburetor. I've got another carburetor kit, or carburetor and carburetor diaphragm gasket needle kit coming for this. The carburetor's like $20 and the kit was $7. And it's not just a carburetor. It probably has the wrong fuel filter, probably has the wrong spark plug in it, and some other little goodies to go in the kit. What was the last thing I ordered? I can't remember. I ordered something for another project that I was working on, and the funny part of it was that they sent through the wrong. Everything was good except the spark plugs. They weren't even close. They were chainsaw spark plugs that came through with it. I don't know. Oh, it was a kit for Kawasaki. It was a kit for Kawasaki. Yeah, that's right. It was a coil kit for Kawasaki that I had before. I think I showed you this on another video. Why did my coil fail after 500 or 600 hours? See all that oil mess in there? Now here's the kicker of the kickers. Yeah, you can see it very well. Take a look at that tab. That's the shutoff tab. Black as coal. Why? Because the wire was just brushing on it up here. It wasn't on there. I don't even know how they shut this thing off. So whatever was happening there drove the thing nuts. Smoked the coil, and then I fired the thing up after putting 2 new coils in. Had to pull the engine completely out, clean it all up, which was like 2 or 3 hours of mechanical cleaning. Because there's a lot of other work that I did to it already. So you're going to pressure wash that? I don't think so. So I did what I could, blew it, scraped it out, poked it out, yanked it out, blew it out. And I mean, I had garbage. If you take a look at the photos that I put on Facebook under Pops Wrench 2, or just plain Pops Wrench, I can't remember. No, Pops Howard. That's what it is. Sorry, Pops Howard on Facebook. You'll see some of the pictures, and I'll probably put some on here if they're not here already, about how much dirt was in there just from the blower housing, the flywheel housing itself. There's a pile in there that was like this big and about that deep, just from the internals in the blower housing. What's that do to it? It cuts down the volume. It restricts it. On top of that, it's a rough surface compared to nice, smooth plastic or metal housing. So it restricts it on volume-wise, and it restricts it by surface roughness. And the fins were plugged in between the valves and the cylinder head. They were plugged around the outside. It was a mess. I couldn't believe they didn't catch it on fire. And when I fired it up, there was a plume of smoke that came out of the thing for 15 minutes while I drove it around the yard to be sure it would work. And the other one is, when you see wires and other stuff that's unplugged, find out what they're for. I asked the guy what these were, and he just tells me they're in the way. So he unplugged them and pulled them out of the way. I said, unplugged them from where? Well, I don't know now. And there I was, figuring out, all right, get the tractor down to my house. Got it down to my house, studied the harness, and I figured they plugged together, but you want to be sure because there's electronics and safety stuff in there that can go backwards. So I got a hold of a service manual, found out where they were supposed to go, what wire went to what, started the problem. Noisy air compressor, just a little 1-horse. Why only 1 horse? That's all I need 99.9% of the time. Just something to blow a little air. We'll stop here shortly. There we go. So once I got it fired up and knew where the wires were going, what they were doing, I found out how many different things were unplugged, weren't working. Just before you start pulling things out, mark them. Remember where they went. Take pictures if you have to. It made a huge difference. Because one of them was, he's trying to tell me that it's not getting fuel there, it's not pumping. Well, it was pumping fuel there. The carburetor had a shutoff solenoid. The shutoff solenoid needed those plugs connected. So I got away from working on the road, bringing it back here to the shop where I could look it over. Well, I don't know, it ran like that before. No, it didn't. So you have to be careful of those things. Anyway, well, you have to be careful at home. I mean, you want to work on the stuff at home, right? Take pictures. Take notes. Stop screwing around like I fixed tractors. This is going to be... No, not anymore. Because there's another lawn tractor that was there with fuel injection. It worked and now it doesn't. But there's been a dozen things done to it that didn't need to be done. So what do you do with that? Anyway, that's just to take notes, write things down. Mark it. I don't have one right here now, but usually I have a paint stick. I did have one here because when I disconnected the switch here, one of these two leads, I marked. Why? It won't make any difference. The saw doesn't care. The ignition doesn't care. But they're hooked onto the connectors for a purpose. And some of it is space. So make sure the wires go back where they belong. Just something simple. Well, it doesn't make any difference, and why'd you bother to do it? Because it makes a difference spatial-wise. Coil doesn't care. Doesn't care which way in the switch ground and not ground is. Or does it? Yeah. Because if you hook it up the wrong way, one side is grounded, ding-a-ling. Permanently. Until you change it. And you won't run. So mark things. Know what you're doing. Anyway, time for me to get back at it. My knee is starting to really hurt, so my day may have shortened. Catch you guys later. Arr!